The humid coastal air of Manta carries the sound of engines as a U.S. Air Force aircraft descends toward the Eloy Alfaro Air Base. On the tarmac below, security personnel stand at attention, their movements precise and deliberate. Moments later, the door of the plane opens and U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem steps into the bright Ecuadorian sunlight. Cameras click, flags ripple. It is a moment that bridges Washington and Quito, one defined by shared security concerns across the Pacific and the Andes. Ecuador's President Daniel Noboa, accompanied by key members of his cabinet, greets her with a firm handshake. Behind them stand Foreign Affairs Minister Gabriela Sommerfeld and Defense Minister Giancarlo Lofredo, symbols of a young administration confronting a wave of organized crime and transnational threats that have tested the country's resilience. The atmosphere is formal but charged with purpose. The US and Ecuador are rebuilding a partnership that had once been a cornerstone of regional counter-narcotics operations, and today's visit signals that cooperation is taking new shape. The Eloy Alfaro Air Base, once home to a joint anti-drug task force that operated with US surveillance aircraft 2 decades ago, has become a focal point for both memory and strategy. The base sits just a few kilometers from the Pacific, its runway stretching toward a horizon where smugglers' routes once intersected with patrol flights. As Noem walks across the tarmac alongside Sommerfeld and Lofredo, the cameras follow their measured pace, the symbolism unmistakable. 2 nations revisiting an alliance through a lens of mutual necessity. Inside the command center, the briefing begins. Maps of maritime corridors, radar coverage grids, and coastal security networks flicker on the walls. Ecuadorian officers detail the scale of the country's challenges: narco-trafficking routes that exploit remote jungle rivers, small aircraft flying under radar to transport cocaine to Central America, and gangs that have turned Ecuador's port cities into battlegrounds for control of the global drug supply chain. For Washington, this meeting is more than courtesy. It reflects growing anxiety about instability spreading through the hemisphere and the risk that Ecuador, once known for peace, could become another flashpoint. Kristi Noem listens carefully, her expression steady. Known for her hardline approach to border security in the US, she brings a message that resonates in Quito, that the fight against organized crime is no longer defined by geography. We have conducted a tour to assess its capabilities and determine how we can strengthen this cooperation, says Foreign Minister Gabriela Sommerfeld, her voice composed yet confident. The words spoken in Spanish echo across the press microphones. It is both an assessment and a declaration. Ecuador is ready to renew trust with the United States. At her side, Defense Minister Giancarlo Lofredo adds context that speaks to history. The visit is being conducted at this location precisely to remember what it once was: the assistance and close cooperation between the United States and Ecuador in the fight against drug trafficking. His tone carries a note of reflection. The past in this room is not nostalgia, it is instruction. Outside, the hum of military vehicles fills the air. A line of grey aircraft stands parked along the apron, their insignias faintly visible in the afternoon haze. Soldiers secure the perimeter, their radios crackling with coded exchanges. From the observation deck, one can see the Pacific waves breaking beyond the base, a reminder that Ecuador's coastline has become both its economic artery and its most vulnerable frontier. In recent years, Manta's port has been at the center of several major cocaine seizures, with authorities intercepting shipments bound for Europe hidden among containers of shrimp or bananas. Each seizure, officials say, reveals a new layer of sophistication among the cartels. Noem's presence here marks the highest-level U.S. security visit to Ecuador in nearly a decade. Since President Noboa took office, his administration has launched what local media call the National Security Rebirth, a campaign to restore state control over prisons, ports, and provinces where criminal organizations have thrived. Washington's involvement signals renewed interest in supporting Ecuador as a strategic partner in South America's northern arc, a zone critical to both counter-narcotics and migration management. As the delegation moves through the hangars, officers demonstrate surveillance equipment, aircraft maintenance capabilities, and data-sharing systems under modernization. Some of the technology has been supplied by European defense firms. Other systems are under evaluation for future U.S. support. For Ecuador, modernization is essential. For the U.S., integration is the goal, ensuring that intelligence flows seamlessly between agencies in Manta, Miami, and Washington. The voice of Gabriela Sommerfeld returns in translation through the narration for English language audiences. We have conducted a tour to assess its capabilities and determine how we can strengthen this cooperation. Her emphasis on strengthen is deliberate. Ecuador, once skeptical of deep military cooperation with the US, is signaling confidence that such partnerships can now coexist with national sovereignty. Meanwhile, the visual narrative captures a handshake between President Noboa and Secretary Noem, both smiling briefly for the cameras before turning back to their advisers. Their discussion, according to officials, includes plans for joint maritime patrols, intelligence exchange on cartel logistics, and a potential training program for Ecuadorian security forces under the US. Southern Command framework. Nothing is publicly signed today, but the symbolism is powerful, a new alignment built on pragmatic cooperation rather than grand declarations. As the press pool documents every movement, Noem's voice can be heard in short remarks thanking Ecuador for its partnership. She speaks of shared vigilance and common defense, underscoring that the threats both nations face, from narcotics to illegal migration, demand unity rather than distance. For Noboa, the optics matter deeply. His presidency has been defined by a promise to restore stability after years of political turbulence, and foreign partnership provides not only resources but legitimacy. The camera captures the ministers, again Lofredo speaking quietly to US advisers, Sommerfeld reviewing a document under the shade of the wing. Each detail feeds the sense of diplomacy in motion, of cautious optimism in a region where cooperation has often faltered on mistrust. The base, once the symbol of foreign presence, is now being reframed as a joint platform for sovereignty and security. In the background, military trucks roll past with soldiers in desert camouflage, their rifles angled toward the ground. They pass a line of hangars where technicians inspect aircraft engines, the metallic clatter punctuating the soft ocean wind. From above, a drone camera captures the vastness of the airfield, the convergence point of policy, geography, and ambition. This visit is not happening in isolation. Across Latin America, US security diplomacy has been intensifying. From Colombia's renewed anti-cocaine campaign to Panama's border monitoring initiatives, Washington is reasserting influence through bilateral cooperation instead of multilateral bureaucracy. For Ecuador, long overshadowed by its larger neighbors, being part of this network is both opportunity and challenge. Noboa's government must demonstrate that foreign partnership can deliver tangible safety without reviving old nationalist debates about sovereignty. As the delegation enters a conference room lined with Ecuadorian flags, journalists are briefly allowed to record the opening remarks. Sommerfeld speaks first, outlining the vision for a regional security framework that respects our independence yet unites our capabilities. Noem nods, taking notes. Noboa adds a short comment about the need for trust and continuity. Though formalities dominate the session, the tone suggests alignment rather than negotiation. Later in private, technical teams from both sides exchange data on migration trends, port surveillance and cybercrime. Ecuador's coastal cities have faced an alarming rise in extortion networks linked to transnational gangs. For the US, those same networks contribute to illicit financial flows and human trafficking routes reaching North America. The shared intelligence aims to close those circuits, a quiet war fought through databases and maritime radars rather than open conflict. The voiceover underscores that this meeting at the Eloy Alfaro Air Base is both symbolic and functional, a gesture to history and a signal to the future. It recalls how between 1999 and 2009, the US operated anti-drug surveillance flights from this very runway. That cooperation ended when Ecuador, under President Rafael Correa, expelled US forces, calling the arrangement a violation of sovereignty. 16 years later, the atmosphere has shifted. The threat now is not foreign presence, but domestic infiltration cartels, gangs, and corruption networks undermining institutions from within. Outside, the sun begins to set over Manta, casting a golden hue across the runway. Soldiers lower the flags, and the American delegation prepares to depart. Before boarding, Kristi Noem pauses briefly with reporters. She thanks President Noboa and his ministers, emphasizing the courage of Ecuador's people in defending democracy and security. Her words are measured, diplomatic, but carry an undertone of strategic commitment. The US is back, not with bases, but with partnerships. As her plane lifts off, the closing shots capture the silhouettes of Ecuadorian officers watching from the tarmac. For them, the visit signals that their fight is being noticed. For Noboa, it is a reminder that Ecuador's security cannot be separated from regional stability. And for Washington, it reaffirms that South America remains a vital front in shaping hemispheric security. The narration deepens into analysis, linking the day's visuals to broader themes. In recent years, the nexus of crime, migration, and governance has defined US foreign policy in the Western Hemisphere. From the Darien Gap to the Galapagos corridors, Washington's concern has shifted toward hybrid threats where drug trafficking intersects with human smuggling, environmental crime, and digital espionage. Ecuador's role in that matrix is pivotal, a logistical hub, a democratic ally, and a vulnerable target all at once. Experts say today's meeting could pave the way for a new bilateral security accord, potentially under the framework of shared maritime awareness. That initiative, already piloted in the Caribbean, would allow real-time data exchange between US Coast Guard systems and Ecuador's Navy. It could also bring new training programs for Ecuador's border agents and forensic analysts, a move aligned with Noem's domestic agenda of combating cross-border threats before they reach US territory. The narrative shifts back to the local context. Residents of Manta recall the days when American personnel were stationed here, filling hotels and cafes, creating a mini economy around the base. Some view the return of cooperation as a chance for renewed development, others with skepticism. The government insists that no foreign troops will be permanently based in Ecuador, only coordination, intelligence sharing, and joint exercises. For many Ecuadorians weary of violence, such nuance is secondary to results. As the film's visuals blend aerial shots of the coastline with archival footage of past operations, the voiceover reminds viewers of the cost of instability. In 2024, Ecuador experienced one of its deadliest years on record, with thousands of homicides linked to gang warfare. The prisons became command centers for cartel leaders, and police officers were attacked in broad daylight. It was against this backdrop that Daniel Noboa, at 36 years old, took office, promising a new era of law and order. Today's meeting with the US Secretary of Homeland Security is part of that pledge made visible on the world stage. The narration continues, describing how both governments are exploring technology transfers from drone surveillance to encrypted communication systems. Ecuador seeks logistical autonomy, while the US wants reliability. Behind every camera flash lies negotiation, the fine balance between aid and influence. For Noem, a rising figure in US security circles, Ecuador offers both strategic and political value, a partner that demonstrates the effectiveness of bilateral cooperation without military occupation. The film's middle sequence focuses on quiet moments. Noem examining a radar console, Lofredo pointing toward a flight path on a digital map, Sommerfeld taking notes while aides whisper behind her. The narration weaves in expert commentary. Ecuador's location along the eastern Pacific makes it a critical node in narcotics transit, a fact long acknowledged by intelligence agencies. Yet geography alone does not define its role. The country's democratic stability, its ports, and its trade links give it influence disproportionate to its size. Washington knows that strengthening Ecuador's security architecture is an investment in regional containment. Since 2023, the Biden and then Trump II administrations have oscillated between retrenchment and engagement. Noem's trip embodies continuity and acknowledgement that hemispheric stability cannot be outsourced or ignored. The speech fragments from both sides underline this mutual recognition. Noboa, in a closing statement later released to the press, says Ecuador is committed to working with allies who respect our sovereignty but understand our urgency. For Noem, the phrase trusted partner appears repeatedly in her prepared remarks. It is diplomatic shorthand for long-term alignment. The night descends over the airbase. Floodlights illuminate the runway where Noem's delegation had walked hours earlier. The flags of both nations flutter side by side, their shadows stretching across the concrete. A military band rehearses softly in the background as the narration offers its final reflection. Security, it says, is no longer a static agreement, but a living dialogue between nations, between institutions, and between the ideals of sovereignty and solidarity. The meeting in Manta may appear routine, a page in diplomatic protocol. Yet, within its details, the handshake, the shared map, the revived memories of past cooperation lies the architecture of a new regional order built not by power alone, but by recognition of shared peril. In the coastal city of Manta, where history once divided and now reconnects two nations, the promise of renewed partnership rises again, cautious, deliberate, but necessary. For Ecuador and the United States alike, this is not merely the return of cooperation, it is the reaffirmation that security, when shared, becomes strength.
Body. Ajo, Burgos.
Rápido, pan. Thank you.
We have conducted a tour of the Eloy Alfaro Air Base to assess its capabilities and determine how we can strengthen this cooperation. The visit is being conducted at this location, Eloy Alfaro Air Base, precisely to remember what it once was, the assistance and close cooperation between the United States and Ecuador in the fight against drug trafficking.